Hey everyone, it's Charlie here, and in this video we're going to be answering the popular question, are selective schools only for genius students? And so if you're looking to get into one of the big four selective schools in Victoria, be that Melbourne High, McRob, Nossal or Suzanne Corey, you might be wondering just how smart do you need to be to get into one of these schools, and is it only for the absolutely most talented, most gifted, most high achieving students, or if you're a student who's just working hard and you're getting pretty good marks, are you capable of getting into one of these schools as well? And this is actually something that I experienced when I was applying for Melbourne High myself. So when I was in year 7, I was never one of the students that was singled out as being one of the high achieving students. I wasn't put in accelerated programs. I wasn't put in special classes for the gifted and talented students. I was just a student who worked hard and did fairly well and was probably just above average in my class. And so going into preparing for the Melbourne High School exam and applying for the selective schools, I felt a bit nervous. I felt like I probably wasn't the type of student who would be getting into these selective schools. I knew that I looked at Melbourne High and some of the other selective schools and that they had median ATARs of 95, which means the average student scoring in the top 5% of the state. And at the school I was at, that's kind of ATAR score was pretty unfeasible. I was aiming for more like an 80 ATAR score. I thought being the top 20% of the state would have been a really good achievement. And so going into this exam, I felt nervous. I felt like I probably wasn't the type of student who would normally get into one of these schools. But I applied anyway, and I got some resources. I attended some workshops. From these workshops, I came home with this big book of resources for me to work on my own. And I worked through these resources in the lead up to the exam, to the point where when I actually went into the exam, I actually felt pretty confident. I felt like I'd done a lot of preparation. I'd worked hard, which normally worked well for me at school. And I went into the exam with a lot of confidence. Unfortunately, I walked out and I did quite poorly. I did quite poorly across all 5 of the sections on the exam. And this meant I actually didn't get into Melbourne High when I first sat the exam. And this really just fueled my belief that selective schools were just for really genius students. They were just for the 1 or 2 students in each class or even each school who were just far above everyone else in terms of intelligence and natural ability. And it really made me think that selective schools were just for those types of students. And the next year rolled around, I worked hard throughout the year and I thought, look, I'm just going to give it one more attempt. And so I sat the selective school exam again the next year, trying to gain admission into Melbourne High for year 10. And this year I prepared for the exam in a bit of a different way. So I kind of treated it almost like an extra school subject, where I built myself a structured curriculum, which I worked through. I had some support to help me through that process, but then I also had the best resources and people holding me accountable to make sure I was on track with my preparation. And so I prepared for the exam in a very structured way with accountability, with support, just as if it was another school subject at school. And what happened this time was very different. So I walked in the exam, again, feeling quite confident, and this time I actually got into Melbourne High. And what this really taught me is 2 things. Number one, it taught me that it's not just the students who are naturally gifted, who are naturally geniuses, who are naturally always picked out in the gifted and talented programs, they can get into these selective schools. That was never me. I got in through hard work and through preparing in the right way. But the second thing it taught me is that the reason why some students get into these schools and yet other students don't isn't really to do with their natural intellect or IQ. A lot of it comes down to how they prepare for the exam. So when I prepared the first time, I went to a few sporadic workshops on weekends and I had some resources and I did sporadic practice after school and on the weekends myself, but I didn't treat it in a structured way. I didn't treat it like a school subject. Essentially, it would have been the same as if I attended a few workshops for maths at the start of the year. They gave me the maths textbook and they said, go home, study for the year yourself, come back at the end of the year and do the exam. That's kind of how I treated my preparation in the first year. And that's how a lot of students treat their preparation who don't actually end up getting into these selective schools. Whereas in the second year, I treated it more like a school subject. So I did get some resources at the start of the year, but I had a structured plan which I worked through throughout the whole year for my preparation. I had support, I had people holding me accountable. And I really treated it as if it was another school subject where you would have accountability, you'd have support, you'd have guidance throughout the whole process. And it meant that by the time I got to the exam, I'd been progressively building my skills and building my ability. And so I felt confident. I actually knew that I was getting the scores I needed in a lot of the sections. And so I went in feeling like I had a really good chance. And ultimately, I did get into Melbourne High. And so it really showed me that the key thing with this exam is how you prepare. And one of the things which a lot of parents often wonder is this test, it is testing more ability rather than achievement. And so it is a little bit different to what your child would be tested on with a school subject. So can you actually study for this exam? But this is something which ACER, which is the creator of the Select Entry exam, actually says on their website. They say these skills, and these are the skills that they assess on the exam, can be developed over time through exposure to a culture of learning, by being immersed in a variety of age-appropriate engaging stimuli, and by being encouraged to think deeply and freely discuss their learning. And so ACE, the creators of the exam, do agree that this is an exam that you can prepare for, you can improve at, and you can learn to master through preparation over a sustained period of time. And this is really something that I found myself, and something that I've seen with a lot of other students as well, both when I was at Melbourne High. I know a lot of students, they prepared for a number of years, and that's what allowed them to get into these schools. But then also with the tutors that we work with, we've seen them tutor a significant number of students into these schools as well. And so the key takeaways from this video is, if you're wondering, are selective schools only for genius students? What I've found is that no, they are not for genius students. I know a lot of students who were never the top 1 or 2% of students in their class. They weren't in gifted or talented programs. They weren't picked out as being that student that was at the top of the class, just like me. I was never in that category, and yet they have gained entry into these schools by preparing in the right way, by treating it like a school subject, having a guided curriculum that they work through, being guided by some sort of teacher or tutor or expert throughout that process, and then being held accountable as well to make sure they stay on track. And so really from here, there's 2 things you can do to maximize your preparation. One option is to help your child prepare for this exam yourself by learning the concepts, teaching your child and finding the right resources, and helping your child to prepare for these select entry exams just as if it was another school subject. Otherwise, the second option is to prepare with us, with our tutoring program. We do offer a tutoring program where we provide you with the structure, accountability, and guidance needed to maximize your chance of success. Our tutors have helped hundreds of students get into selective schools. They've got a minimum of 3 years experience, and we typically see success rates from our tutors from at least 80 to 90%. On top of that, if your child joins one of our tutoring programs and doesn't get into a selective school, we actually give them free tuition the next year to make sure they do. And so if you're interested in learning more, feel free to click the button below this video and book in for a free call with us. Otherwise, we hope you enjoy this video, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the videos coming up on our channel.